Bob Seger had a #1 hit and still called it one of his worst decisions. He gave away writing credit on a song that made millions. He turned down Hollywood when everyone said he was crazy. And when his drummer was paralyzed at 28, Bob carried that weight quietly for decades. But the part nobody talks about is what happened in 1988 when he disappeared at the peak of his fame. The music industry thought he was finished. His fans thought something was wrong. The real reason he walked away says more about him than any song ever could. Bob Seger came into the world on May 6, 1945, in Detroit, Michigan, at Henry Ford Hospital. He was the second son of Charlotte and Stuart Seger. Stuart worked as a medical technician for Ford Motor Company and could play several instruments, so music was not a distant thing in their home. It was right there in the rooms where Bob grew up, mixed in with radios, records, and the steady hum of a factory town that smelled like car plants and sounded like big signals rolling through the night. But the house itself did not feel steady. Bob's parents fought constantly, and the fights spilled out into the neighborhood with shouting, doors slamming, and crying that people nearby could hear late at night. For a kid, that kind of noise does something deep. It makes a bedroom feel less like a safe place and more like a waiting room where you brace for the next storm. So, while other kids relaxed into childhood, Bob learned how to stay alert, how to read moods, and how to sit with tension that never fully left the air. That fear later showed up in the emotional weight of the characters in his songs, the ones who feel trapped or lonely even when surrounded by people. Then the biggest crack came in 1956. Bob was only 10 when his father left. Stuart, who struggled with alcoholism, packed up and moved to California, leaving Charlotte, Bob, and Bob's older brother George behind. There was not just a man walking out the door, it was the whole idea of stability being yanked away overnight. Charlotte suddenly had to be both parents at once, carrying the money problems and the daily grind without any real support. Bob later talked about that moment like it ended something inside him. The simple trust of childhood snapped. In its place grew a deep distrust of men who run from their families. After Stuart was gone, the family slipped from comfortable into struggling. They moved into smaller, poorer housing where even basic things became careful choices. Bob watched his mother fight to keep the house standing, working hard and still coming up short. That image stayed in him. It did not make him soft. It made him determined. It made him want a different future, not just for himself, but because he had seen what it looked like when a parent carried everything alone. That is where music turned from a hobby into a lifeline. When the house felt like a place you could not breathe, the radio became a doorway. Bob later said, "Little Richard was the first one who really got to him." Those songs did not whisper. They exploded. That wild energy could drown out the yelling downstairs. Then Elvis Presley came through the speakers too, giving him a feeling of freedom and excitement that his home did not provide. Rock and roll was loud, cheap, and emotional, and it made a kid feel like there was another world beyond the walls. In 1957, the first record he ever bought was Come Go With Me by the Dell Vikings. That moment was small on the outside, just a purchase. But inside, it was the start of an obsession. By the time he was 13, that obsession turned into creating. In 1961, he wrote his first song, The Lonely One. He recorded a demo with his band, the DeSelles, at Del Shannon Studio in Ann Arbor. That demo ended up on the radio one single time on a local Ann Arbor station. Then the tape disappeared. It stayed lost for 60 years and only resurfaced in 2021, when it aired twice on Detroit's WCSX-FM with Seger's permission. People finally heard that rough teenage track after decades of silence, and it felt like someone opened a time capsule from a kid who was already trying to write his way out. The DeSelles themselves were changing too. They started as a doo-wop vocal group but grew into a full rock outfit. That shift mattered because it pulled Seger toward a bigger sound and toward writing, not just copying. Then, when the Beatles hit American radio in 1964, it lit a fire under a whole generation. Covers could get you paid, but songwriting could make you somebody. Seger chased that idea hard. Another Michigan kid chased it too, Glenn Frey, who would become a founder of the Eagles. Their paths crossed in the Detroit club world, and by 1966, Frey was 16 and touring. They both had the same itch to stand out with original songs instead of disappearing into the endless crowd of cover bands. Seger's road into that world was not smooth. After the DeSelles, he hustled through local bands. In March 1965, he released TGIF on Hideout Records, but that first official recording did not even credit his name the way he wanted. It came out under Doug Brown and the Omens. Still, he kept pushing. Around that same time, he met Edward "Punch" Andrews at a bowling alley gig. The partnership that formed there became one of the longest in rock history. Punch stayed with him through fights, bankruptcies, lean years, and comebacks from 1965 all the way to Seger's retirement in 2019. In February 1966, Seger released East Side Story as Bob Seger and the Last Heard. The song exploded locally, selling about 50,000 copies in Detroit. A scout named Cal Rudman heard the buzz, and Cameo Parkway Records signed him quickly. For a second, it felt like the long struggle might finally turn into a clean climb upward. Then, in June 1967, Cameo Parkway went bankrupt. Promotion stopped. Momentum died mid-climb. It was like watching a wave rise, and then suddenly the ocean disappears underneath it. Still, he pushed forward. In 1968, after signing with Capitol Records, Seger scored his first national hit with Ramblin' Gamblin' Man, which reached number 17 on the Billboard Hot 100. The track had that raw energy and gritty voice that made people turn their heads. It also carried a quiet piece of history. Glenn Frey, still unknown, provided backing vocals and played acoustic guitar, his first professional studio recording. But even after a hit, the business could still twist the knife. In 1969, Capitol forced guitarist Tom Nim into the Bob Seger system as a co-leader for the follow-up album, Noah. The album flopped. Seger briefly quit, tried college for 6 weeks, and only came back because the band begged him to return. Even then, the struggle did not stop. Mongrel came out in August 1970, but peaked only around number 171, and Capitol dropped him that same year. At 25, he was broke, without a big label, staring down the kind of silence that swallows musicians. So he leaned into Punch Andrews and a smaller setup. During that stretch, he chased something special at Muscle Shoals Sound Studio in Alabama, a place known for classic recordings. The session sounded like a dream until money turned it into a punch to the gut. Producers quoted $1,500 a side, and Seger thought that meant per album side. Then Punch told him the truth. It was $1,500 per song. The budget blew up instantly, and the plan collapsed. Around 1973 and 1974, he made a brutal choice to stop playing lead guitar and focus on singing and writing. Chasing big guitar riffs was shredding his voice and stealing time from songwriting. Giving that role to Drew Abbott freed him. By October 1973, the Silver Bullet Band formed from Detroit area players who were not chasing Polish. They were chasing survival. In 1974 alone, they played 265 shows. On one brutal run ending December 31, 1974, they played in Miami, and then drove about 1,300 miles straight back to Detroit, about 25.5 hours, without stopping, because hotels cost too much. Seger held the wheel the longest while others slept. That exhaustion seeped into the music, and it is why songs like Turn the Page feel like someone telling the truth in a quiet voice while the road keeps rushing past. Then came the moment that captured who they really were. On September 4th and 5th, 1975, they recorded Live Bullet at Cobo Hall in Detroit. Released on April 12, 1976, Live Bullet became the turning point. Detroit embraced it like an anthem. Yet, even as it grew, the weird truth remained in one place. Seger felt like a hero in another. He was still fighting to be known. On June 26, 1976, he headlined the Pontiac Silverdome for 76,000 Detroit fans. But just days earlier, on June 23, he had played a small club in Schaumburg, Illinois, to only a few hundred people. And then, just months after that live triumph, tragedy hit. In February 1977, drummer Charlie Allen Martin was hit from behind by a car on a service road and left paralyzed from the waist down. He was only 28. Seger mourned him deeply because Martin was not just a drummer, he was part of the heartbeat that drove the band through those years. In October 1976, everything changed. Night Moves came out on October 22nd, his ninth studio album, and for the first time, it carried the name of the Silver Bullet Band. Seger had been grinding since 1961. 15 years of hauling gear from Ann Arbor garages to opening slots at Cobo Hall led to this moment, when Night Moves climbed to number 8 on the Billboard chart and eventually sold 6 million copies. The long wait exploded into stardom. Seger was 31, and suddenly the world was listening. When the title track Night Moves hit number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 in early 1977, Seger was already 31, which in rock terms felt old. Yet that long road shaped him. He once said those years of struggle helped him stay steady. The success flipped his life overnight. He later joked that they went from station wagons to jets after that album. By 1977, he was headlining arenas like the Pontiac Silverdome in front of 80,000 fans. What looked like an overnight success was really the payoff of 15 years of stubborn persistence. But with that success came fear. After Night Moves sold 6 million and Stranger in Town in 1978 sold over 7 million, Seger felt what he later called platinum paranoia. The pressure of following a giant hit froze him. He admitted the sudden fame trapped him in doubt, worried he would never top Night Moves. In 1978, he rewrote most of the lyrics to Old-Time Rock and Roll for Stranger in Town, but passed on a writing credit, thinking it was filler. When Risky Business turned the song into a pop culture moment in 1983, it climbed to number 28 and became one of the most played jukebox songs in America. Seger later called skipping the credit the dumbest financial move he ever made, as the song generated millions in royalties he did not receive. Just this past year, in February 2025, the song saw another massive resurgence when it was featured in a Super Bowl 59 commercial for a major car brand, introducing it to a new generation and adding yet another layer of royalties Seger doesn't see. Then came Shakedown in 1987. The song was first meant for Glenn Frey for Beverly Hills Cop 2, but Frey lost his voice to laryngitis just before recording. He asked Seger to step in. Seger rewrote verses, kept the chorus, and recorded it quickly. On August 1, 1987, it hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, his only chart topper. It earned an Oscar nomination for Best Original Song, losing to Take My Breath Away from Top Gun. In 1988, at the height of his fame, he stepped away to care for his dying mother, Charlotte, who passed on February 20, 1989. Industry insiders thought it was career suicide. He did not care. His father had left when he was 10, and he refused to repeat that absence. Later, after a massive 1996 tour, he vanished from music for nearly a decade, focusing on his children. He coached their sports teams and stayed home, choosing family over the road. In early 2025, a previously unreleased live recording from Seger's 1977 Night Moves tour surfaced on a private collector's tape and was authenticated by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The footage, which includes an emotional on-stage dedication to drummer Charlie Allen Martin, is scheduled for a limited theatrical release in fall 2026 as part of a documentary titled Turn the Page: The Lost Reels. Fans who thought they had seen everything are now discovering a new layer of Seger's raw vulnerability. Through it all, the Silver Bullet Band stayed loyal. Bassist Chris Campbell and saxophonist Alto Reed stood beside him for decades. Reed's sax on Turn the Page became part of rock history. His friendship with Glenn Frey remained central. They had met in Detroit clubs in the 1960s, with Seger mentoring the younger Frey. Together they wrote Heartache Tonight, which hit number 1 in 1979. When Frey died on January 18, 2016, Seger was shattered. A year later, he released Glenn's song for free on his website, a quiet acoustic tribute filled with memories. In 2017, during his Runaway Train tour, Seger suffered a ruptured disc in his neck. He canceled 19 shows and underwent cervical laminectomy surgery on October 20th. Recovery was brutal. Pain hit 10 out of 10. He could not walk alone at first, and was banned from singing for months. Yet, he fought back and returned for the Traveling Man Tour in 2018 and 2019, ending his road career in Philadelphia on November 1, 2019. After more than 50 years of touring, recognition came steadily. He entered the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2004, and the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2012. Against the Wind earned a Grammy. Rolling Stone later ranked him among the greatest singers of all time. And as unseen footage continues to emerge in 2026, including that long-lost 1961 demo and the newly discovered 1977 concert reel, the world is finally seeing the full picture of a man who carried more weight than any song ever let on.